Ida Amanda Nelson Russell.
Written by her oldest grandchild, John Lamro Hoopes, during 2008 to 2015, with information taken from various credible accounts and biographies and from personal memory. The author was 10 years old at the time of Ida's death in 1956. If you discover discrepancies or inaccuracies in this history, kindly contact me at jlhoops@gmail.com so corrections or amendments could be made.
Ida Amanda Nelson was born in Springerville, Apache County, in the territory of Arizona, on February 22, 1893. She was the second child of Mormon pioneer Edmund Nelson and his plural wife, Margaret Fouts, who raised 5 of his first wife's 8 children. The first wife, Caroline Brinkerhoff, died a year after Ed married Margaret, in addition to her own 7 children. Margaret was 17 when she married Ed, who was 36, as was common with plural marriages in pioneer times. When Margaret gave birth at age 22 to Ida Amanda, there were already 7 children in the Nelson household, which by today's standards was very primitive. Ida's father served on the Stake High Council for 35 years, with the same stake president, David King Udall. Google him. Udall's second wife was named Ida, so perhaps that's where her name came from, but we're not sure. Ida told her daughters that she didn't like the name Amanda. She thought it sounded too old-fashioned. Because there was so much work to do, eventually with 13 living children, 2 infants died, from both wives, there was a division of labor in the Nelson family. These pioneer families raised all of their own food, including animals for transportation, food and milk. They had gardens and orchards for produce, and fields for grains and hay, etc. There was also wood for heating and cooking to gather and chop, clothing to be washed by hand with homemade lye soap, and numerous other domestic duties not done today. Ida was generally asked to work outside in the garden, fields, and orchards, instead of working in the house or kitchen. Although she learned to cook, Ida did not learn as many domestic skills as she would have had she been assigned more typically feminine duties. For example, Ida did not learn to sew, since some of her older half-sisters did all the sewing. Her daughter, Jun, said that because her mother did not have sewing skills, her daughters had to learn them so they could do their own sewing. Ida's parents were strict disciplinarians, which was also common with pioneer families. Her father had a temper and once hit a horse with a quirt, a kind of whip, so hard it backlashed and put out his eye, in which he was blind for the rest of his life. Her mother's family had German ancestry and were very frugal people. Ida was small in stature, but always healthy, even though communicable diseases like diphtheria and whooping cough killed many children, and people suffered without antibiotics, etc. Ida's daughter, Jean, said that when she was attending BYU, a man approached her to tell her what an angel her mother had been. Ida had not been afraid to go into the homes of people with communicable diseases to provide personal care for them. When Jane later asked Ida about this, she showed Jean her patriarchal blessing, which promises her that she would remain healthy in caring for others. Her family didn't have many material things, and Ida's diet wasn't what we would consider particularly nutritious, especially during the winter months when fresh vegetables weren't available in that relatively cold country. Ida fondly remembered having new potatoes and green peas on the 24th of July, a holiday celebrating the arrival of Brigham Young's party to the Salt Lake Valley. She told Jean that the smell of lemons reminded her of the 4th of July when they would make lemon meringue pie. At Christmas, the Nelsons had little money for presents. Ida later told her daughter, Elaine, that one Christmas there was a party that she really wanted to look her best for, and she remarked to her mother that she surely would like to have some combs for her hair. She said her mother went into the bedroom and returned with 2 beautiful combs, which she really prized. This was the only present that Ida received that year for Christmas. It was common that a wagon and team would arrive at the Nelson home with friends and or relatives. They would stay for quite a few days, which would mean more work, but more fun for all. With the money Ida earned from working for other people, Ida was able to obtain her own clothes, which she washed by hand with homemade soap and ironed with a heavy flat iron heated on the wood stove. Ida completed the public schooling available in Springerville, graduating on February 17, 1913. After graduation, she obtained a job at LeSueur's store in Eagar, which was adjacent to Springerville, where she first met Joe Udall, who was also working there. They became good friends. After working at LeSueur's for a year, Ida had enough money to buy clothes, etc., that she needed to move away to further her education. During August 1915, Ida went with her sisters, Lorena and Caroline, and cousins, Eunice Curtis, George, who married Spencer W. Kimball's sister Alice, and Dave Nelson, to Thatcher, Arizona, a journey of several days by horse and buggy, to attend the LDS Church-sponsored Gila Academy located there. Ida first lived in the home of Charles and Celine Phillips. Celine was the daughter of Thatcher's first stake president, Christopher Layton. This two-story red brick home, later used as a hotel, was built in the Nauvoo style and was on College Avenue, 1 block north of Main Street. Ida worked very hard there to pay for her room and board. Ida also worked for Mrs. Pace, who gave her piano lessons in return. She learned to play the piano well enough that Ida gave piano lessons in her younger days and played for church meetings, etc., off and on during the rest of her life. Elaine said that she begged her mother to teach her to play the piano, and Ida always said she was too busy, that she would do it later. Jean remembers that her mother loved the popular song Indian Love Call from the movie Rose Marie, which was on Broadway before it was made into a movie, for the first time in 1928 and the second time in 1936. It was a duet sung by Nelson Eddy and Jeanette MacDonald. One can hear the song by Eddy and MacDonald on YouTube.com. When Elaine was told about this, she didn't remember that her mother liked this song, but said she remembers her mother playing the popular song, Let the Rest of the World Go By, on the piano, from memory, nostalgically, many times over the years. Elaine said that Ida would play this song with lots of embellishments and that she was a very good pianist. Ida also had some sort of emotional attachment to this song, but wouldn't elaborate. After her first term at Gila Academy, Ida and Eunice rented a back room from Mrs. Cheney, Eunice's aunt, that had a bed, a table, and a small wood stove where they could do some cooking. This home was on the site where Les Farley's home was later built in Thatcher. Ida had boyfriends at Gila Academy, but didn't get married during her school years in Thatcher. This was during the middle of World War I, and many young men were off fighting for their country in Europe. There were also a lot of changes taking place in society and in the world during those years. From pictures that we have of her taken at the time, we know that Ida wore her hair stylishly short and enjoyed wearing the clothing styles of the day. During the 1918 to 1918 school year, Ida attended Utah Agricultural College, now Utah State University, in Logan, Utah. A copy of her transcript obtained from USU is attached as a document. From looking at the transcript, you can see that she was enrolled in the home economics school, where she took art, textiles and clothing, zoology, and physical education. She made C grades, which were considered average. Her year of birth is listed as 1899, 6 years after her actual birth in 1893. It may have been a mistake, or perhaps she wanted to be younger. She didn't ever talk about her experiences in Logan. In fact, her daughters weren't even fully aware that she went to school in Logan until 2015, when Ida's grandson, John, learned this from the university. Ida had many Nelson relatives who lived in the Logan, Utah area, which was a long way from Eagar, but by then there was train service. Ida had a younger sister, Caroline, who was called Carrie. Ida was, according to a biography of Carrie, available in her memories section of FamilySearch, close to Carrie. Ida helped Carrie prepare for her marriage, held in her parents' living room, and then went with them on their honeymoon trip to Salt Lake City to be sealed in the temple. This biography is interesting reading, where more can be learned about Ida. Prior to her marriage, Ida had at least once romance with Joe Udall, which apparently didn't work out, and she returned to her hometown and found a position at Becker's Mercantile in Eagar, where she worked for many years, becoming a manager. This is where she met her future husband, Fred Russell, who was 8 years younger than she was. They both said it was love at first sight when he first came into the store wearing his state agricultural inspection station uniform. Ida and Fred were married by the stake president and county judge David K. Udall in 1926 at the county seat in St. John's after Fred had his first marriage annulled by Judge Udall, who was a friend of Ida's father. Her father served on President Udall's High Council for over 30 years. President Udall had a wife named Ida, which could have impressed Edmund. Ida saved her money and had built a new home for herself in Springerville, or Eagar, we don't know where, which they moved into after their marriage. They enjoyed the beautiful new home, but while they were away on a trip, some friends who were staying there carelessly caused a fire and the house burned, and there was no insurance. Ida and Fred then moved to Phoenix, where there were more opportunities for work. Ida and Fred's first child was born on October 1, 1926, in Phoenix, at the Arizona Deaconess Hospital, now St. Joseph's Hospital. On her original birth certificate, her name was listed as Ida Elaine Russell, but she was always just called Elaine, after Elaine in the King Arthur stories that her father liked. Elaine was born prematurely, weighing about 4 pounds at birth. When Elaine was blessed, the name given her was Margaret, after Ida's mother, Margaret Foots, Elaine Russell. This name discrepancy was not cleared up until Elaine was in her 50s, when her birth certificate was obtained from the state she had never needed one before to verify dates for submission to the ancestral file. Her father was still alive at that time and said they just forgot what they named her and didn't ever get a birth certificate, which, with his affidavit, was officially changed to Margaret Elaine. Ida gave birth to 4 more children, Fred Jr., called Freddie, who was born in St. John's on November 15, 1927, Carol Dean, who was born in Phoenix on October 28, 1929, Jean, who was born in St. John's on January 28, 1932, Asterisk, and Beverly Ann, who was born in Clifton on January 10, 1936. Fred tried several business ventures. For a while, he was the Maytag washing machine sales representative for all of Arizona, but during the Great Depression of the 1930s, people couldn't afford to buy washing machines. He also sold Sure-Stop fire extinguishers. These were pear-shaped glass globes filled with red-colored carbon tetrachloride, now known to be a toxic and cancer-causing chemical, and were hung from the ceiling. Heat caused the bottom to open so the liquid would put out the fire. During the Depression, some people hoped their buildings would burn so they could collect the insurance money, Fred told his grandson John, so sales were not particularly good. Once the Russell family took a business trip to the East Coast, which must have been interesting. Fred did not include anything about this trip in his autobiography, so we don't know much about where they went or what they saw. Ida didn't write a biography that we know of. It was while they were on this trip that their home on Montecito Street in Phoenix burned. This was their second home to burn. Ida was also a natural salesperson, always trying to find some way to supplement their income by working. She was a hard worker and was never known to stay home sick in bed, according to her daughter Elaine. Fred worked for a while as a logger, a choker setter, in the forest near Shaulo, and they rented the Hiram Cheney place in Pinedale, where Fred also tried farming. From Pinedale, where Elaine always said she was the most happy and her father was regularly attending church, they moved to Tempe so her dad could attend the teachers' college there. The Russells moved frequently. Fred was a restless man and times were hard during 1930s, according to Elaine. After Fred's graduation from Arizona State Teachers College at Tempe, now Arizona State University, in 1933, the family moved back to the White Mountains, to Linden, a little settlement near Sholo, where Fred obtained his first full-time teaching job. Ida did many things to supplement the family income, including selling corsets door-to-door in Sholo, where they moved after Fred lost his teaching job in Linden due to small-town politics. Elaine says it was because he was teaching the Darwin theory, in which he believed and also tried to teach Elaine. He had a copy of Darwin's Origin of Species, and Elaine remembers him telling her about how life began according to his beliefs, apparently learned at the University of Utah. Then Fred prospected for soft coal, bituminous, in the Sholo area and dug the coal himself with the help of a mentally challenged boy, who, with his mother and other brother, lived with the Russells in Pinedale, mostly by hand with a pick, shovel, and a wheelbarrow. Fred moved his family to Globe, about 87 miles south, which took driving down and back up the Salt River Canyon, like a mini Grand Canyon, where Ida could sell coal door to door to the copper miners that Fred was bringing in his truck from Show Low. This didn't last long because natural gas lines were installed, bringing an end to the demand for soft coal for cooking and heating in the Globe, Miami area. Even though Ida was an independent businesswoman, and she always worked, she did not drive an automobile, perhaps because of an accident she had when they were first married. According to Jean, Ida apparently parked a vehicle in front of Becker's store and did not set the parking brake. The car rolled and broke the large window. There was another incident when Ida was commuting from Globe to Show Low, hitchhiking, which she did on a frequent basis. She was given a ride by two men, who she overheard when they stopped at the bottom of the canyon that they were planning to violate her. However, Ida hid under the bridge and they didn't find her. The Russells then moved to Clifton, where Fred worked as a teacher at the CCC camp. It was during this time that their 8-year-old son, Fred Jr., was drowned in the Frisco, San Francisco River. They moved from Clifton to Thatcher, where they rented out rooms and provided meals to college students. It was here that Elaine developed rheumatic fever and stayed in bed for almost a year, and their newborn daughter, Beverly Ann, contracted pneumonia and died. From Thatcher, the Russells moved to Safford, where Fred built some apartments from brick he scavenged from old stores being torn down. They lived in a small, one-bedroom apartment, not the larger home he built next to the apartments, as well as a grocery store a few blocks away, which Ida managed, while Fred worked full-time at the state employment office. There were many happy times at the apartments in Safford, with their daughters and grandchildren coming on Sunday afternoons, etc., for parties on the back lawn with homemade ice cream, etc. Elaine has remarked that during the later evenings, they worked until dark. In their apartment, Fred would read, but Ida would sit in her chair and just watch Fred. She loved him very much. Her grandson, John, remembers that Ida made extra bacon and toast for breakfast and left it on a plate on the kitchen table all day for snaking. John liked going to Grandma's and eating the leftover breakfast items. They also bought some raw farmland in Cactus, Lebanon, where Fred was born, which he, in his spare time and on weekends, cleared and planted in hay and cotton. They planned to build Ida's dream house there. There was a bright yellow house on the Bowie Highway that every time she passed on the way to the farm, she remarked, "That's what I want my dream house to look like." They were about ready to start building the home when Ida became ill. Around 1954, Ida came down with severe headaches. She went to many doctors who recommended surgery on her neck and slash or brain, which Ida refused to have. She said she wasn't going to have her throat cut. She even went to doctors in Nogales, Mexico, to see if she could find relief. Ida became worse, and when she became bedfast, her sister Loa Nelson Jarvis, a nurse, came to care for her. On November 13, 1956, at 7:30 a.m., Ida passed away in their one-bedroom apartment in Safford. On her death certificate, Dr. W. Warren J. Nelson, who with his brother Dr. Don Nelson were family doctors in Safford for many years, listed causes of death as 1. Alzheimer's disease with an onset of 11 months, 2. Hypertensive arteriosclerotic heart disease, and 3. Old rheumatic heart disease. This is interesting because a positive diagnosis of Alzheimer's, as is diagnosed in 2015, probably wasn't possible to make in Safford in 1956, and Ida did not have an autopsy. Ida's funeral was held at Rawson's Mortuary in Safford, next to the post office, and across the street from the employment office where Fred worked full-time for many years. Ida always tried to be active in the LDS church, and attended with her children when she could, but Fred was antagonistic and didn't want her funeral held at the church. Ida was buried in the Union Cemetery in Safford, where the graves of her son, Freddie, and daughter, Beverly Ann, were later relocated to from Mesa. Fred was also later buried there next to Ida and his children. There is more space in the Russell plot where more family members could still be buried. John remembers going to his grandmother's funeral and seeing his grade school teacher, Angeline Marble, who left school for the funeral. Angeline was related to Ida in some way. Later, Angeline invited John to her apartment, north of the old gymnasium in Thatcher, and showed him her old portable pump organ and talked about his grandmother when she was younger. For years, John fantasized about playing that little pump organ on Ida's grave at the Safford Cemetery. Ida wasn't able to have her own endowment or be sealed to her husband and family because of Fred's inactivity in the church. She received her endowment by proxy the year after her death. However, when Fred was 88 years old and writing his tell-it-all autobiography, his testimony of the gospel was rekindled, and he began to think about his eternal life with Ida. This led to his asking Elaine to pay his tithing and get him ready to attend church, where he talked to his bishop about going to the temple, which he was able to do. Ida and Fred were sealed as a family on May 10, 1990, in the Mesa, Arizona temple, with their 3 living daughters and many other family members in attendance. One of Carol Dean's daughters, Renee, said that she saw the spirits of Ida and Beverly Ann in the sealing room that day. It was indeed a long-awaited and joyful occasion for the Fred and Ida Russell family.